The prosecutor's voice rang out, branding Blord a criminal before all. His lawyer countered fiercely, painting him as a builder of dreams. Blord rose in chains, steady and proud. From nothing I rose, and no lie will bring me down. The night was quiet in Umuji Ebenebe, a small town in Anambra State, Nigeria. The crickets sang outside, the moon lit the dusty streets, and in a little house at the edge of town, a baby cried. It was March 14th, 1998. That baby was named Linus Williams Ifejirika. Nobody could have guessed it then, that this tiny child, wrapped in a faded cloth, would one day become a man the whole nation would talk about. Linus did not grow up in riches. His family had little money. Most days, he had to manage with the bare minimum. He watched his mother stretch every coin to feed the family. He saw his father worry about how to pay bills. Linus was just a boy, but deep inside, he knew he didn't want this life forever. He wanted more. Linus was different. While other children played football in the dust, he was drawn to gadgets. A broken radio? He would open it. A spoiled phone? He wanted to see inside. Sometimes, he shocked himself with tiny wires. Other times, he broke things beyond repair. But he was learning. His neighbors laughed. "This boy wants to fix everything," they teased. But Linus didn't stop. Inside him grew a hunger, the hunger to understand technology. As he grew older, life didn't get easier. In school, money was always a problem. He didn't have the fancy shoes or the nice bag others had. But Linus had something else, skill. He learned to repair phones and laptops for people. At first, it was just to survive, to buy food, to pay small bills. But soon, he realized fixing gadgets could give him power. Each time he repaired a phone, he didn't just earn money. He earned respect. People started saying, "That boy Linus is smart. He can fix anything." Yet, even with this little hustle, deep in his heart, Linus knew it was not enough. Some nights, Linus would lie awake, staring at the ceiling. He thought about his life, about his family, about the endless struggle, and a voice inside him whispered, "You are not meant for this small life. There is more out there, much more." But how? How could a boy from a small town, with no connections, no riches, no power, ever rise beyond his limits? That question would follow him for years, until the day he discovered something that would change his life forever, something called Bitcoin. And that was how the journey began. A journey of hustle, hunger, riches, and danger. A journey that would turn Linus Williams into the man called Blord. But every rise comes with battles, and every fortune comes with a price. The year was moving fast. Linus was now in university. Life as a student wasn't easy. The bills never stopped coming. School fees, hostel rent, food, books. Sometimes he had nothing but Gary and water to keep him going. But Linus had something most students didn't have. He had skills. His phone and laptop repair hustle kept him alive. He could fix anything. But still, every time he counted his little earnings, his heart sank. "This money is too small," he would whisper to himself. "How will I ever make it big with this?" One evening, Linus sat in a cyber cafe, helping a student unlock a faulty phone. As he waited for the software to load, he overheard two young men talking at the next table. Their voices were low, almost secretive. "Bro, I just made triple my money last week." "Serious?" "Yes, Bitcoin is the future. Forget Naira. This is where the real money is." Linus froze. His ears sharpened. Bitcoin? It was the first time he heard that word. That night, he couldn't sleep. The word Bitcoin danced in his head. He rushed back to the cafe the next day and started searching. What is Bitcoin? How does it work? Page after page, video after video, article after article. He read until his eyes burned. A digital money that could make people rich? A system outside the banks? Something powerful, but risky? It felt like he had just opened a hidden door into a new world. Linus didn't waste time. He saved every little money he had. He skipped meals. He delayed new clothes, until he had enough to buy his first Bitcoin. The moment he clicked the button, his heart raced. Sweat gathered on his forehead. What if I lose it all? What if this is a scam? But another voice inside whispered, "This could be your way out. This could be the beginning." At first, things looked good. The value went up a little. His hope rose with it. But suddenly, the price dropped. His small savings turned into almost nothing. It felt like a knife in his chest. All his sacrifice gone. That night, he lay on his bed staring at the ceiling. Tears filled his eyes. Maybe I was foolish. Maybe I was chasing shadows. But then, something deep inside him refused to die. Instead of giving up, Linus made a decision. He would not quit. He would learn. Every book, every online course, every forum about crypto. He would consume them all. And slowly, trade after trade, loss after loss, he began to understand the game. One evening, after weeks of studying and practicing, Linus placed another trade. This time, he was careful. This time, he used all his new knowledge. The numbers moved. His heart pounded. Up, up, up. For the first time, he didn't lose. He won. It was a small profit. Very small. But to Linus, it was the proof he needed. I can do this, he whispered to himself. I will master this. What he didn't know was that this small victory was the spark that would set his entire life on fire. The boy from Umuji Ebenebe had just taken his first real step toward becoming Blord, the Bitcoin Lord. The nights grew longer for Linus. While other students were busy partying, playing games, or sleeping soundly, Linus sat in front of his laptop, his eyes glued to the glowing screen. The sound of the fan whirring in the background, the flickering light bulb above him, and the tension in his chest. These became his world. Every number on the Bitcoin chart felt like a heartbeat. Up, down, rise, fall. And every move determined whether he would eat well tomorrow or go hungry again. It wasn't easy. Many of his friends mocked him. This thing you're chasing, Linus, it's all scam. Better focus on school, my brother. Bitcoin won't pay your bills. But Linus didn't listen. He knew they didn't see what he saw. At night, when the whole hostel was quiet, he whispered to himself, "This is the way out. I know it. I just have to hold on." Weeks turned into months. Losses turned into lessons. And then, slowly, the tide began to turn. A trade that once would have drowned him now gave him profit. A risk that once looked foolish now made sense. He wasn't just gambling anymore. He was calculating. He was learning. He was becoming a real trader. And the profits started to grow. At first, it was enough to pay for food. Then it was enough to buy a better laptop. Then, it was enough to pay his school fees without begging anyone. Linus was no longer the struggling boy everyone pitied. He was becoming someone else. The hostel began to notice. That quiet boy who used to patch phones now walked with a new kind of confidence. He no longer borrowed. He no longer begged. He even started helping others with money. Rumors spread like wildfire. Have you heard? That boy Linus is making money online. From what? Bitcoin. They say he's cashing out big. For the first time in his life, Linus felt what it meant to be respected. But deep down, he knew this was just the beginning. One late night, after a long trading session, Linus stepped outside. The sky was dark, the moon was high, and the street was silent. He looked at the stars and whispered, "One day, I will not just be comfortable. I will be great. I will own cars. I will build companies. I will change my life." It wasn't just a dream anymore. It was a promise. As his profits grew, so did his reputation online. On trading forums, on chats, on WhatsApp groups, people began to know him. He needed a name, something that would stand out, something that would carry weight. And so he chose it, Blord, short for Bitcoin Lord. A name that started as a joke would one day become a brand worth millions. But at that moment, Linus didn't know that. All he knew was that his life was changing. Blord's wallet grew heavier with every trade. And with money came choices. He bought his first car. Nothing too fancy, but enough to make heads turn. He started dressing better, living better, moving differently. People who once ignored him now wanted to be his friend. And those who once mocked him now whispered behind his back in envy. But Blord didn't care. He was too focused on the future. What he didn't know was that with every rise, shadows also begin to gather. And his success would soon attract attention he never bargained for. The boy from Umuji Ebenebe was gone. In his place now stood a young man who was quickly becoming a legend. A man who would soon step into the world of luxury, power, and danger. Blord had begun his rise, and nothing could stop him, or so he thought. The sound of an engine roared through the streets of Akka. Students, traders, and passers-by stopped in their tracks. A sleek car, shining, spotless, powerful, rolled past them. And behind the wheel was Blord. This was no longer the boy who once ate Gary to survive. This was a young millionaire. The car was just the beginning. Soon, Blord began to spend on things people in his neighborhood had only seen on TV. Branded clothes, designer shoes, the latest gadgets, trips to cities others only dreamed of visiting. People stared when he walked by. Some admired. Some envied. Some whispered, "How did he make it?" Bitcoin, they say. That internet money. This boy has become something else. Blord's success was not quiet. He loved the feel of power, the way people's eyes followed him, the way respect came without asking. He began to explore more luxuries. The Mercedes G-Wagon, its engine growling like a beast on the road. The Rolls-Royce, gliding like a king's chariot. And later, the Lamborghini Urus, a symbol of speed and wealth. Each purchase was more than just a car. It was a statement, a declaration that he had arrived. With wealth came attention. Friends multiplied overnight. Everyone wanted to be close to him. Girls smiled wider when they saw him. Young men wanted to learn from him. And slowly, Blord began to build not just wealth, but influence. Blord wasn't just spending, he was also building. He launched businesses. Blord Bitcoin Store, for trading crypto. Blord Real Estate Limited, for properties and houses. Blord JetPay, for fast digital payments. Billpoint Technology, to handle bills and transactions. From phones to fintech, from gadgets to luxury, Blord's name was everywhere. He was no longer just a trader. He was an entrepreneur. Social media became his stage. Pictures of fast cars, luxury watches, designer clothes, and travel filled his pages. Every post sparked comments. "God, when will my time come? Blord, please mentor me." See life. From nothing to something. To many young Nigerians, he was proof that it was possible, that one could rise from nothing and become somebody. But not everyone was impressed. As Blord's name spread, so did whispers. Some said he was too young to have such wealth. Others wondered if his success was truly clean. And in quiet offices, in hidden corners, people in power began to ask questions. Who was this boy? Where was his money really coming from? But Blord was too busy enjoying his new life to notice the storm building on the horizon. At night, when he lay in his luxury home, he sometimes thought back to his old days. The hunger, the struggle, the shame. And he would smile to himself. "Never again," he whispered. "Never again will I be poor." What he didn't know was that the higher he climbed, the more dangerous the fall would become. Blord was living his dream. But dreams can sometimes turn into nightmares. The city lights glowed against the night sky. Inside his mansion, Blord sat on a leather chair, scrolling through his phone. Notifications filled the screen. Another business deal sealed. Another young fan begging for mentorship. Another admirer praising his lifestyle. Life was sweet. Too sweet. But outside those walls, shadows were moving. And the shadows carried badges. Not everyone celebrated Blord's rise. In markets, in offices, in online spaces, people whispered, "This boy is too young to be this rich. Can Bitcoin really make someone so wealthy? It doesn't look ordinary." The more Blord showed his wealth, the louder the whispers grew, until they reached ears that did not whisper. They investigated. They asked questions. They made calls. And soon, the eyes of the law were fixed on him. Men in suits began to follow his activities. Unknown numbers tracked his transactions. Hidden reports gathered on desks of powerful agencies. On the surface, Blord's life looked like success. But behind the scenes, it was beginning to look like a puzzle that had to be solved. To some, he was a genius entrepreneur. To others, he was a suspect. Blord noticed little signs. Sometimes he would drive past a checkpoint, and the police would look at his cars longer than usual. Sometimes he heard rumors that government agents were asking questions about him. Friends warned him, "Bro, keep a low profile. You're attracting too much attention. Not everyone clapping for you wants you to win." But Blord only smiled. He had struggled too hard to hide now. "Let them talk," he said. "I built this with my hands. Nobody can take it from me." The days rolled into weeks. Blord's empire grew bigger. His name spread wider. But in hidden offices, files were piling up. The name Blord was written in bold on reports stamped confidential. And in those same offices, a decision was made. He had to be brought in. One morning, the sun had barely risen when the sound of engines echoed down his street. Black Jeeps, dark shades, serious faces. They stopped right in front of Blord's mansion. Doors opened. Boots hit the ground. The EFCC had arrived. Blord, still in his living room, heard the knock. Not the soft, polite knock of a visitor, but the heavy, commanding knock of men who had come for him. The dream he built, the empire he created, the freedom he enjoyed, was about to be tested. The morning was quiet. Birds were singing. The sun had barely risen above the rooftops. Inside his mansion, Blord was sipping a cup of hot tea. His phone buzzed beside him, messages from business partners, fans, and workers. It was just another day, or so he thought. Then came the knock. Not one, not two, but three heavy, commanding knocks that shook the door. Boom, boom, boom. Blord froze. Outside, black jeeps lined the street. Men in dark suits and bulletproof vests stood tall. On their chests, 3 letters glowed like fire. EFCC. Neighbors peeked from their windows, whispering. Children stopped playing and ran inside. The air grew heavy with tension. The agents weren't here for a visit. They were here for Blord. Blord's security guard hesitated. "Sir, it's the EFCC," he whispered nervously. Blord's heart pounded. He stood up slowly, his cup shaking in his hand. What do they want with me, he thought. I built my empire clean. Why are they here? Another thunderous knock came. Boom, boom, boom. Open this door. EFCC. Blord inhaled deeply, straightened his shoulders, and walked to the door. The moment the door opened, silence fell. The agents stared at him. Blord stared back. For a few seconds, it felt like the world had stopped moving. Then, the leader of the team spoke. Mr. Linus Williams Ifejirika, also known as Blord, you are under arrest for suspected internet fraud and financial crimes. The words struck like thunder. Neighbors gasped. Some pulled out phones to record. His staff stood frozen, afraid to speak. Blord tried to stay calm. There must be a mistake, he said firmly. I am a businessman. I run companies. I trade crypto. I've done nothing illegal. But the agents were unmoved. One stepped forward with handcuffs in his hand. The cold metal glinted in the morning sun. Blord's chest tightened. His heart raced. 100 thoughts ran through his mind. Is this how it ends? After everything? After the struggles, the hunger, the hustle? Is this how my story will be written? The agent's voice was sharp. Sir, you have the right to remain silent. Anything you say may be used against you. The cuffs clicked shut around his wrists. Cold. Heavy. Final. The crowd outside gasped louder. Blord, the Bitcoin lord, the young millionaire, the rising star of Anambra, was being led away like a criminal. As they walked him to the waiting jeep, cameras flashed. Phones recorded. Voices rose. Some whispered in pity. Others muttered in jealousy. And some even laughed. So it's true? He was into fraud after all. I knew this money was not clean. God help him. This is serious. Blord kept his head high, but inside, his heart bled. Every step to the jeep felt like a step away from his dreams. From his freedom. From the empire he built. The car door slammed shut behind him. The jeeps rolled away. Through the tinted glass, Blord watched the city pass by, the same city that once cheered his name. Now it felt distant. Cold. Hostile. He leaned back, eyes closed, and whispered to himself. This is not the end. I will fight this. I will not fall. But deep down, fear gnawed at him. Because he knew, battles with the law were not like battles on the Bitcoin charts. This was a storm unlike any he had faced before. Blord's first arrest had begun, and his life would never be the same again. The morning of the trial was heavy with silence. The news had already spread across Nigeria. Blord, the young millionaire, arrested by EFCC. Some called him a fraudster. Some defended him as a victim of jealousy. But everyone was watching. The courtroom doors creaked open. 2 officers led Blord inside, his hands cuffed in front of him. Cameras flashed. Reporters rushed forward. Questions flew from every direction. Blord, is it true you scammed people? Blord, are you guilty of money laundering? Blord, what do you say to your fans? Blord didn't answer. His face was calm, but inside, his chest was on fire. He scanned the crowd. He saw strangers, journalists, even some old friends who had come just to witness his downfall. He clenched his jaw. I will not break in front of them. The judge entered. Everyone rose. The clerk's voice echoed. This court is now in session. Then came the charges. Each one read like a blade cutting deeper into Blord's chest. Internet fraud. Money laundering. Possession of unexplained wealth. Whispers filled the courtroom. They caught him. But is there proof? This boy is finished. Blord stood still, his eyes fixed on the judge. When it was his turn, Blord stepped forward. His voice was firm, but beneath it was the weight of desperation. My lord, I am not a criminal. I am a businessman. I built my wealth through hard work, through Bitcoin trading, through companies that employ young Nigerians. I am innocent. The courtroom buzzed. Some nodded. Some shook their heads. The prosecution wasn't silent. They brought forward documents, bank statements, screenshots of transactions. They spoke of suspicious movements of funds. They painted him as a fraud who had hidden behind Bitcoin to deceive. Each word was like a nail hammering into his reputation. Blord's lawyer rose in defense, challenging every point. Crypto trading is legal. My client's wealth is legitimate. There is no evidence of fraud here. The battle raged back and forth. Accusations, defenses, proofs, counterproofs. The air inside the courtroom grew heavier with every passing hour. At one moment, the prosecution demanded his assets be seized, his cars, his houses, his accounts. Gasps echoed through the room. Blord felt his knees weaken. Everything he had built, everything he had worked for, could vanish in a single ruling. He closed his eyes and whispered to himself, God, don't let this be the end. After hours of heated arguments, the judge's gavel hit the desk. This court has considered the evidence presented. At this stage, there is no sufficient proof that the accused obtained his wealth through fraud. Therefore, his properties and assets are to be returned. Case adjourned. For a moment, silence filled the room. Then gasps. Then murmurs. Blord had won the first battle. As the officers removed his cuffs, Blord exhaled deeply. It felt like air returning to lungs that had been empty for days. Reporters shouted questions again, but this time, his head was held high. He walked out of the courtroom, not as a defeated man, but as someone who had survived the fire. But deep inside, he knew the truth. This was not the end. This was only the beginning. Blord had walked out free, but the eyes of the law were still watching, and the road ahead was darker than he imagined. The court had spoken. The judge's gavel had saved him. And now, Blord was free. When he stepped out of that courtroom, the cameras flashed brighter than ever. Reporters shoved microphones at him, but he didn't answer a single question. He didn't need to. His silence was loud enough. His walk alone told the story. The Bitcoin lord had returned. That night, the mansion lit up with music and laughter. The gates swung open to a fleet of luxury cars. Friends, admirers, and business partners poured in, dressed in their best clothes. The air was filled with champagne bubbles, the scent of expensive perfumes, and the sound of clinking glasses. To Blord, someone shouted, raising a glass. The king of crypto, another added. Blord smiled as he stood at the center of it all, his designer suit shining under the chandelier. He had faced the law. He had survived. And now, he was back. More powerful, more respected, more feared. The days that followed were louder, grander. Blord didn't just return to his old life. He elevated it. New cars joined his fleet. New mansions rose under his name. His businesses expanded, reaching more cities and more customers. On social media, his posts became a display of wealth and luxury. Private jets, exotic vacations, suitcases full of dollars. Every picture screamed one message. Blord had defeated the system, and nothing could stop him. Young people across Nigeria looked up to him. They flooded his pages with comments. Boss, show me the way. God, bless me like Blord. From nothing to something. You're an inspiration. For many, he was no longer just a man. He was a symbol, proof that greatness could come from humble beginnings. Blord embraced this role. He gave motivational talks, encouraged young men to hustle, and even funded projects to support others. He wasn't just rich. He was becoming a movement. But not everyone was cheering. Behind closed doors, powerful eyes still watched him. To them, his wealth was too much, too fast, too loud. In private meetings, his name still appeared in reports. Files still moved across government desks. And questions still hung in the air. Was this man really clean? Or was he just clever enough to escape the first time? One evening, as he stood on the balcony of his mansion, Blord looked at the city lights. The wind brushed against his face, carrying with it memories of his past struggles. He smiled and whispered, "They tried to bring me down, but I'm untouchable. I will never fall." But in the shadows of the night, the storm was already gathering. A storm fiercer, darker, and deadlier than the first. And when it arrived, it would shake the very foundation of everything Blord had built. Blord had returned as a king. But kings, no matter how powerful, always have enemies. The city of Abuja buzzed with life. Cars honked, markets roared, music spilled from bars. But in the quiet corners of government offices, something darker was brewing. And at the center of it all was one name: Blord. Blord's life was louder than ever. He was flying private jets, showing off luxury cars, and speaking boldly about wealth. But behind the smiles and the glamour, little cracks began to show. A business deal that fell apart unexpectedly. A close associate suddenly under investigation. Unfamiliar faces loitering around his neighborhood, watching. To outsiders, these were small things. But to Blord, they were warnings. One night, a trusted friend pulled him aside during a party. "Blord, you need to slow down," the friend whispered urgently. "The law is still watching you. Don't give them reasons to come again." Blord chuckled, sipping his drink. "My brother, I defeated them once. I'll defeat them again if they try. I am untouchable." But deep inside, the words lingered. Untouchable. Was he really? In hidden offices, files were updated. But this time, the allegations were darker, heavier. Cryptocurrency fraud, money laundering, even terrorism financing. Reports painted him not just as a businessman, but as someone funding dangerous networks. True or not, the evidence was being stacked against him. And when the government wants someone, truth doesn't always matter. Blord began to feel it. Sometimes, when he drove his Lamborghini, he noticed the same black SUV following from a distance. Sometimes, his phone calls ended with strange clicks, as if someone else was listening. Sometimes, meetings were canceled without explanation, deals cut off suddenly. The walls were closing in. But Blord refused to show fear. On social media, he posted pictures smiling in designer clothes, sitting on cars worth millions, living life as though nothing could touch him. Yet at night, when he lay in bed staring at the ceiling, sleep was far away. One evening, he sat with his inner circle in his mansion. The lights were low, the air heavy with tension. "Boss," one of them said quietly, "I've heard things, very bad things. They are planning something bigger this time. You need to be ready." Blord's jaw tightened. He looked around at his friends, then back at his glass of wine. "Let them come," he said slowly. "They will find me stronger than before." But even as he said it, a part of him trembled. Because he knew, storms never warn twice. The reports were complete. The signatures were signed. The orders were given. In the shadows, a team was already preparing. The target was marked: Blord. And this time, the storm would not come quietly. Blord had survived once. But survival the second time would be far more difficult. The storm was almost here. It was a quiet morning in Abuja. The streets had barely awakened. Shops were still closed, and the first rays of sunlight stretched lazily across the city. Inside his mansion, Blord was seated at the dining table, enjoying a meal with his family. His laughter echoed through the room as he told a story about his early struggles, how he once sold ice blocks on the street to survive. The children giggled. The house staff smiled. Everything felt peaceful. But outside, the storm had already arrived. Down the road, a black convoy of SUVs rolled in silently, their engines humming like thunder. Inside the vehicles sat men in dark suits and bulletproof vests. Some carried files. Others carried weapons. Their faces were cold. Their mission was clear. On their chests, the same 3 letters burned like fire: EFCC. But this time, they were not alone. Heavier forces were with them. The mansion's gates trembled as the jeeps pulled up. Guards rushed forward in confusion. Before they could ask questions, they were pushed aside. Then came the knock. A thunderous, merciless knock that echoed through the mansion. Boom, boom, boom. Everyone inside froze. Blord's wife looked at him, fear flashing in her eyes. The children stopped laughing. The knock came again. Louder, harder, unforgiving. Boom, boom, boom. Blord stood up slowly, his face unreadable. One of his aides whispered nervously, "Sir, it's them again. They're here." Blord clenched his fists. 1,000 thoughts raced through his mind. Why now? What do they want? Will I survive this again? Taking a deep breath, he walked to the door. The weight of every step felt like walking toward fate itself. When the door swung open, the silence was deafening. Rows of stern faces stared back at him. Men armed, ready, determined. At the front, the leader stepped forward and spoke with a voice like steel. "Linus Williams Ifejirika, also known as Blord. You are under arrest for financial crimes, cryptocurrency fraud, and terrorism financing." The words fell heavy in the air. His wife gasped. His children began to cry. The staff stood frozen, unable to move. Blord's chest tightened. "Terrorism financing," he repeated, his voice breaking with disbelief. "That is a lie. I have never." But before he could finish, two officers stepped forward. Cold metal cuffs clicked around his wrists. The same sound he had heard once before. But this time, it felt final. The gates burst open wider. Reporters, already waiting outside, rushed forward with cameras flashing. Blord was led out in handcuffs, his head held high but his heart sinking deep inside. The crowd screamed, "Fraudster! Show us the money now! Crypto thief!" Others wept silently, unable to believe the man they admired was being dragged away again. Phones recorded. Videos spread instantly online. And in minutes, the world knew. Blord had been arrested again. The Jeep door slammed shut. The engines roared. The convoy pulled away. Inside the vehicle, Blord sat in silence. His reflection stared back at him in the tinted glass. He thought of his family, of the empire he had built, of the enemies who must be smiling now. His heart pounded as he whispered to himself, This storm is different, and I don't know if I can come out of it alive." Blord's second arrest had begun, but this time, the road ahead was darker than anything he had ever faced. The cell door slammed shut with a metallic echo that rang in Blord's ears. Darkness swallowed him. The air was thick, heavy, filled with the stench of sweat and damp concrete. This was not the life of a king. This was not the mansion, nor the luxury cars, nor the champagne nights. This was the dungeon of trials. The first night was the hardest. Blord sat on the cold floor, his back against the wall, his hands cuffed in front of him. The silence was broken only by the occasional cough of another prisoner, the scurrying of rats in the dark. He tried to sleep, but every time he closed his eyes, the sound of the judge's gavel, the flash of cameras, the cries of his children returned to haunt him. And always, the echo of those terrifying words. Terrorism financing. The next morning, the door opened. Two men in plain suits entered. They carried no weapons, just files. But their presence was heavier than guns. Blord was dragged into a dimly lit room. A single chair, a single table, a blinding bulb hanging above. One of the men dropped the file on the table. "Mr. Ifejirika," he said slowly, "we know everything. The money, the transactions, the hidden accounts. Tell us the truth, or it will be worse for you." Blord raised his head, his voice firm but trembling inside. "I am innocent. I am a businessman. I don't fund criminals." The second man leaned forward, his voice low and sharp. "We can make this easy, or we can make this very, very hard." Day after day, the interrogations continued. The questions twisted, circled, stabbed at him like knives. Where did this money come from? Who are you working with? Do you know these names? Sometimes they shouted. Sometimes they stayed silent, letting the silence choke him. Sometimes they left him in the room for hours, the bulb burning into his eyes. Blord's strength was fading, but he refused to confess to crimes he hadn't committed. News from outside trickled in. Some friends who once drank champagne with him now spoke against him, claiming they always knew he was suspicious. Business partners cut ties. Even some fans on social media turned, calling him a scammer, a liar, a disgrace. Each betrayal was a dagger to his chest. But what hurt most was the silence of those he had trusted the most. One day, after weeks of torment, a lawyer came to see him. But instead of reassurance, the words brought more fear. "Blord, things are bad. The charges are serious. They're not just after your money this time. They want to bury you." Blord's heart sank. The walls of the cell seemed to close in on him. He was a king without a crown, a lion trapped in chains. That night, he knelt on the cold floor of his cell. Tears streamed down his face as he whispered a prayer. "God, if this is the price of my success, then give me the strength to survive it. Do not let them destroy me. Do not let my story end here." His voice cracked, but in the silence of the dungeon, his prayer was the only thing he had left. Blord had faced many storms before, but this one was not just about his freedom. It was about his very soul. The days in custody dragged like years. Every morning felt the same. The clanging of the prison doors, the heavy footsteps of guards, the hollow echo of chains. But something was changing. Outside the prison walls, the world was preparing for a battle. The trial of Blord, the Bitcoin lord, was approaching. Abuja buzzed with rumors. In offices, people whispered about the upcoming case. In markets, traders argued. "He's guilty. Nobody makes that kind of money clean. No, leave him. That boy is a genius. They just want to bring him down." On social media, his name trended every day. Memes, arguments, prayers, curses. The internet was divided. Half the country wanted him freed. The other half wanted him buried. The city wasn't just waiting for a trial. It was waiting for a spectacle. Television stations played old clips of Blord, stepping out of flashy cars, throwing money at parties, smiling in designer suits. But now, those same clips were replayed with a darker voiceover. Linus Williams Ifejirika, also known as Blord, faces charges of cryptocurrency fraud, money laundering, and terrorism financing. Every station carried the story. Every headline screamed his name. Blord wasn't just a man on trial anymore. He was a national headline. Inside his cell, Blord sat in silence, listening to the faint voices of guards discussing his case. One guard muttered, "If he comes out of this, he'll be stronger than ever." Another replied, "Stronger? He won't come out. They'll make sure of that." Blord clenched his fists, his mind burning with questions. Would this be the end of his empire? Would his children grow up with their father behind bars? Would his enemies finally win? Lawyers came and went, piling documents, strategizing endlessly. Blord sat through meeting after meeting, his face stoic, but his heart pounding. They practiced his defense. They drilled him with possible questions. They warned him of the dangers. But no preparation could quiet the storm inside his chest. On the eve of the trial, the prison was unusually silent. Blord lay on his back, staring at the cracked ceiling above him. The weight of the world pressed down on him. Memories of his journey returned in flashes. The boy selling ice blocks on the street. The young man discovering Bitcoin. The king living in luxury. The father now chained in a cell. Tears welled in his eyes, but he wiped them quickly. Tomorrow, the world would be watching. And no matter what happened, he had to walk into that courtroom like a man, not broken, not defeated, but Blord. The stage was set. The city was waiting. The world was watching. The verdict approached. The courtroom was packed. Every seat was taken. The air was thick with whispers, cameras flashing, and the scratching of pens as journalists prepared to record history. The trial of Blord, the Bitcoin lord, was about to begin. The heavy doors creaked open. Blord walked in, escorted by armed officers. His wrists were chained, but his head was high. The cameras exploded in flashes as if lightning had struck. Gasps rippled through the room. Some looked at him with disgust. Others, with admiration. But everyone was watching. He took his seat in the dock, his lawyers flanking him. His eyes scanned the room and stopped at the front row. There sat his family. His wife's face was pale, her eyes swollen from tears. His children clutched her hands tightly, confused, afraid. Blord's chest tightened, but he gave them a small nod, a silent promise. "No matter what happens, I am still your father. I will not break." The judge entered. The courtroom rose. The gavel struck once, sharp and commanding. Court is now in session. The charges were read aloud, one by one. Cryptocurrency fraud, money laundering, terrorism financing. Each word was like a knife slicing through the air. Blord sat still, his face calm, but inside, his heart pounded like a war drum. The prosecution rose first. Their lawyer was sharp, ruthless. He painted Blord as a criminal mastermind, a man who built his empire on the tears of others, a fraudster hiding behind Bitcoin, even a supporter of dangerous groups. The crowd murmured, some nodding in agreement. Every word struck like a blow. Then came the defense. Blord's lawyer stood tall, his voice firm, cutting through the tension. "My lord, the man before you is not a criminal. He is a visionary, a businessman, a man who rose from poverty to success through innovation and hard work. These charges are not justice. They are persecution." The courtroom roared with divided voices. Some clapped. Some booed. The judge banged the gavel for silence. Blord himself was called to the stand. He rose, every step heavy with destiny. The prosecutor's voice was like fire. "Mr. Ifejirika, are you telling this court that you made millions clean? No fraud, no crime, no blood on your money?" Blord's voice was steady, though his throat was dry. "Yes, every kobo I earned was from my sweat, my risk, and my belief in a future nobody else believed in. I am not perfect, but I am not a criminal." The courtroom fell silent. For a moment, even his enemies seemed shaken by his words. Hours dragged like days. Arguments clashed back and forth. Documents were presented. Witnesses spoke. By evening, The tension was unbearable. The judge announced a short recess before delivering the verdict. Blord sat in silence, staring at the floor. His wife's eyes were locked on him. The nation waited. The gavel struck again. Everyone rose. The judge sat, his face unreadable. The entire courtroom froze. Blord's heart thundered in his chest. This was the moment. This was destiny. The judge cleared his throat. The silence was so sharp it could cut. In the case of Linus Williams Ifejirika, also known as Blord, every ear leaned forward. Every camera flashed. Every breath was held. The verdict was about to fall. Blord's fate hung by a thread. The world held its breath. The courtroom was silent. So silent that you could hear the ticking of the old clock on the wall. So silent that even the air seemed to stop moving. Blord stood tall in the dock, though his legs trembled beneath him. His wife's hands shook where she sat. His children clung to her arms, their wide eyes filled with fear. The judge raised his papers slowly. Every eye followed. Every heart waited. The gavel hovered. The words of destiny were about to be spoken. The judge's voice was deep, steady, but heavy with power. In the case of Linus Williams Ifejirika, also known as Blord, a pause. A long, cruel pause that seemed to stretch into eternity. Blord's breath caught in his throat. The room leaned forward as one body. Then the words fell like thunder. This court finds the defendant. The gavel struck once, bang. Not guilty. For a split second, there was silence. No one moved. No one breathed. The words seemed too heavy to understand. Then, like a dam breaking, the courtroom erupted. Cries, screams, applause, gasps. The room shook with chaos. Supporters of Blord leapt to their feet, shouting, "Justice! Justice has been done." Some wept openly. Others fell to their knees, praising God. But not everyone rejoiced. On the other side, enemies hissed in anger, shaking their heads, muttering, "Corruption! How can this man walk free?" The gavel banged again and again, but the storm of voices drowned it out. Blord's knees gave way, and he sank onto the chair behind him. For the first time in years, tears rolled freely down his cheeks. His wife rushed forward, breaking through the crowd. She threw her arms around him, sobbing uncontrollably. His children clung to his legs, crying, laughing, unable to understand fully but knowing their father was free. Blord held them all tightly, whispering, "We made it. We survived. God did not let me fall." Outside the courthouse, thousands had gathered. When the news broke, the streets erupted in celebration. Some danced. Some prayed. Cars honked. Flags waved. People shouted his name. But in hidden corners, not everyone smiled. Enemies clenched their fists. Jealous rivals whispered in dark rooms. They knew Blord had survived, but they also knew he was now more powerful than ever. As Blord stepped out of the courtroom, reporters swarmed him, cameras flashing like fireflies in a storm. He raised his hand high, his chains now gone, his voice strong. "They tried to bury me, but they forgot. I am a seed." The crowd roared. His words spread like wildfire across Nigeria, across Africa, across the world. The Bitcoin Lord had walked through fire, and he had come out, not burned, but shining. But deep inside, Blord knew one truth. This was not the end of his story. This was only the beginning of another chapter. The sun blazed high over Abuja that morning, but it wasn't just the heat of the day that set the city burning. It was the name on everyone's lips. Blord, the man they thought would fall, the man they thought would be buried forever. He was walking free, and this time, he was coming back stronger. The convoy of cars moved through the city like a river of power. People lined the streets, shouting, cheering, waving as the black SUVs passed. Children ran barefoot, screaming, "Blord! Blord! Bitcoin Lord!" Old women raised their hands in prayer. God has done it for him. Even strangers who had never met him felt part of his victory. Because his story wasn't just his anymore, it was theirs too. The story of a man who fought the system and survived. When Blord finally stepped through the golden gates of his mansion, his household erupted in joy. Employees cried, kneeling before him. Friends and relatives embraced him, their voices breaking with relief. But Blord didn't go straight to his throne-like chair or his office. He went first to the family altar in his home. He knelt, his wife and children beside him, and whispered, "Thank you, God. They wanted to destroy me, but you gave me another chance. I will not waste it." For days, Blord kept a low profile. No flashy parties. No loud posts on social media. The world expected him to boast, to taunt his enemies, to shout his freedom from the rooftops. But Blord was quiet. Behind closed doors, he planned. He studied. He rebuilt his empire in silence. Because he knew, the loudest lion is not the one that roars. It is the one that waits, then strikes. Weeks later, when the world thought he had gone quiet, Blord returned. He appeared at a business conference in Lagos, dressed in a sharp black suit, calm and unshaken. The cameras turned instantly. The audience rose to their feet. He walked to the stage slowly, every step echoing like thunder. Then he spoke, his voice strong, unbroken. They dragged me through fire. They chained me in darkness. They called me a fraud, a criminal, a terrorist. But look at me today, I am still standing. I am proof that no matter how deep they bury you, if you are chosen, you will rise again. The hall shook with applause. People wept. Some shouted his name. Blord had not just returned. He had returned as a king. But far away, in quiet offices and hidden corners, not everyone celebrated. His enemies watched the news with clenched jaws. He slipped away this time, one muttered. But we will be ready next time. Because for every king, there are always rivals. And for every victory, there is always another battle waiting. Blord had survived the storm. But storms are never gone forever. The king had returned. But would the crown stay on his head? The world celebrated Blord's freedom. News channels replayed his speeches. Social media burned with his name. Supporters called him a lion who could never be caged. But not everyone was celebrating. Far away from the noise, in quiet rooms where the curtains stayed drawn and the air reeked of cigar smoke, men gathered. Men who had power. Men who had money. Men who hated Blord with a fire that burned in silence. It was midnight in a luxury apartment in Lagos. The lights were dim, the city below glowing like scattered stars. 5 men sat around a polished glass table. Their faces were hard, their voices low. One of them, a senator with cold eyes, tapped the table with his ring and spoke. We made a mistake. We underestimated him. Now he is stronger than ever. Another, a rival businessman, spat bitterly. Do you know what this means? Investors are running to him. People trust him even more now. If we don't crush him, he will own everything. The room fell silent. Then the oldest of them leaned forward, his voice calm but chilling. Then we will not fight him in the open. No, we will strike from the shadows. Quietly, patiently, until he falls. Their whispers were like poison. Spread rumors of fraud again. Plant spies in his companies. Block his contracts behind closed doors. Turn some of his closest allies against him. The plan was not to attack the king directly. The plan was to poison the soil beneath his throne until it collapsed. And worst of all, one of the men at that table was someone Blord had once called a friend. Days later, Blord noticed little things. Meetings that suddenly got canceled. Contracts that slipped away without reason. Business partners who once called him brother now avoided his calls. At first, he brushed it aside. But deep down, his instincts warned him something was wrong. One evening, as Blord left a private meeting, he felt it. A shadow. A pair of eyes watching from the dark. The streets were quiet. His car door opened, but just before stepping in, he turned sharply. Nothing. Just silence. But the feeling lingered. Heavy, chilling, unshakable. Blord had returned as a king. But now, enemies waited in the shadows. And the real battle had only just begun. The night was calm. The air smelled of rain. Blord sat in his study, the glow of his laptop painting his face in soft light. He was deep in thought, reviewing plans for his next venture. Everything seemed steady. Everything seemed under control. But the shadows were moving, and their first strike was coming. It began quietly. Bank accounts suddenly frozen. A major deal, worth billions, canceled at the last minute. Government letters arriving at his office, filled with accusations and investigations. Blord's managers rushed into his mansion, their faces pale. Sir, something is wrong. They are targeting us again. Blord's fists clenched. He knew this wasn't ordinary. This was coordinated. The enemies had begun their strike. But the sharpest knife came not from strangers. It came from someone close. One of his trusted allies, a man who had dined at his table and laughed in his home, had secretly betrayed him. He had leaked information to the rivals, feeding them details of Blord's moves. When Blord discovered the betrayal, his chest tightened. The hurt was deeper than any prison cell, deeper than any accusation. So this is how they play, he whispered. They think betrayal will break me. But Blord was not a man who bowed easily. He moved swiftly, calling emergency meetings, shifting funds, protecting his businesses. He fired the betrayer publicly, making an example of him. And then he spoke to his people, his voice calm but unshaken. They are trying again. But listen to me. No weapon formed against me shall prosper. They can fight my name, they can fight my wealth, but they cannot fight my destiny. His staff erupted in applause, their fear replaced with courage. News of the attack spread, but so did the news of his response. Supporters saw how he stood firm, refusing to bow. His enemies, who expected him to panic, were shaken. Because instead of collapsing, Blord began to shine brighter. It was clear now. They could strike from the shadows, they could whisper and plot, but they could not erase him. Blord stood one night on the balcony of his mansion, staring at the city lights. The wind carried the sounds of life. Cars honking, people laughing, music in the distance. He thought of his journey, from selling ice blocks, to Bitcoin, to prison, to freedom, and now, to surviving betrayal. He smiled faintly. They tried everything, he whispered. But I am still here. And as long as I live, my story is not over. The storm had come. The shadows had struck. But the king still stood. The tale of Blord was reaching its final chapter. The storms had come. The enemies had struck. The chains of prison had held him once. But in the end, Blord was still standing. Not just standing, but rising higher than anyone thought possible. Blord remembered where he came from. He remembered hunger. He remembered struggle. And he refused to let others suffer the same. He opened his hands wide to the world. He paid scholarships for countless young students, children from poor homes who now dreamed of becoming doctors, engineers, lawyers, innovators. He funded hospitals and churches, quietly, without cameras, because true giving needed no stage. He built homes for widows, fed the hungry, and lifted people from the streets into a life of dignity. People began to say, Blord is not just a businessman. He is a blessing. But generosity was only part of his story. Blord's vision was bigger, much bigger. One by one, his fintech creations rose like giants across Nigeria and beyond. BillPoint app, making it easier for people to pay their bills with just a click. JetPay app, lightning-fast transfers, trusted by thousands. Famous app, connecting people in ways they never thought possible. Ofunds app, helping businesses grow and ordinary people save smartly. Each app wasn't just a product. It was a piece of his dream, a dream of financial freedom for all. But Blord didn't stop with technology. He built legacies in stone and steel. In Lagos, the city of David Estate rose proudly, a place of beauty, safety, and class. In his hometown of Anambra, another city of David shone like a jewel, proof that no matter how far he went, he never forgot his roots. Where once there were empty lands, now stood thriving communities. Families lived in homes that once were dreams. Children played on streets built by a man who was once just a boy selling ice blocks. One evening, Blord stood at the balcony of his estate. The sun was setting, painting the sky in gold. His wife stood beside him. His children laughed in the garden below. He closed his eyes and breathed deeply. He had been called many things: fraudster, criminal, genius, lord. But the truth was simple. He was a man who refused to give up. A man who built not just wealth, but a future for others. As the stars appeared in the sky, Blord whispered softly, My story was never just about me. It was about showing the world that no matter where you start, no matter how many enemies you face, you can rise. You can win. You can leave a legacy. And so, the tale of Blord, the Bitcoin Lord, did not end in prison, or in betrayal, or in defeat. It ended with scholarships, fintech apps, thriving estates, and lives transformed forever. The boy who once sold ice blocks had become a man who built cities. The man they tried to bury had become a legend. The name lived on. Blord, the Bitcoin Lord, the man who could not be broken. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe, like, leave a comment, and don't forget to share. Thanks.